Welcome back to another episode of the Tracy Take. I'm Ryan.
And I'm Tyler. How's it going today, Ryan?
It's going pretty good. It's going pretty good, you know. Had a pretty good day at graduation for a pretty close person in my life. So that was all fun. So
yeah, it was better than your December graduation when it was
35 degrees.
I know, yeah.
Well, at least it wasn't the day before when it was 35 with an 11-degree wind chill and it was raining.
Yeah, did they have it separated by 6 feet again?
No, they didn't.
Oh,
they
okay.
didn't. They didn't even enforce the mask rule in the stadium anymore.
Oh,
So,
really? It's crazy how things have changed now.
Yeah, I know. It's been 5 months.
Yeah.
But honestly, they're starting to get the vaccine out. Hopefully things kind of start to open up more. I mean, I know baseball stadiums are at full capacity now.
Yeah, the Braves are full capacity now. Texas has been at full capacity, I think.
Since opening day.
So,
yeah. But,
which is good. Let's get things back to normal. Let's get things open up. Let's get these full football stadiums.
I know. I'm ready to go to some football games. I know the Patriots are at Atlanta this year, and I think they're at Carolina.
Okay.
And so
we might need to go to that game. We might need to look at some tickets.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. It depends on how this podcast turns out. We don't start getting some ad revenue, and I don't know if I can afford it.
That's a good point.
But no. So actually that's a pretty good segue into our topic, and we're going to do the AFC South draft review today.
NFC South.
Or NFC South. Sorry.
Yeah, you can talk about AFC South. I came prepared for NFC South.
yeah. I was going to say we might have to do some research real quick. Yeah, no. NFC South. Atlanta Falcons, Carolina Panthers, New Orleans Saints, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. As you said it, the Super Bowl champions division and the future Super Bowl champions division.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think we'll just continue to go in draft order.
Yeah, I think that works. I think that's exactly what we did for the preview of the draft. I think that's a great kind of segue into the post-draft review. That sounds post-draft review. That sounds much better. And I'll get things started, obviously, with the Falcons as the Falcons fan, unfortunately, in the family. But I honestly think the Falcons had a pretty good draft. One of the biggest complaints was the lack of pass rushing ability taken in the draft. But I think all things considered, I think they did a great job taking best player available in the draft. I would have absolutely loved, and I think we would have been a great steal if he fell this far, if Ronnie Perkins fell all the way to the beginning of day 4 and the Falcons would have picked him up, but your Patriots picked him up. And so that I think would have been a great draft steal if he had fallen just far enough. But that all being said, taking Richie Grant with the second pick, I think trading back and then adding a 4th-round pick as well to go with that. They end up getting Drew Dalman, which by all reports he could be the future starting center for the Falcons. Getting Jalen Mayfield, he played offensive tackle in college, but will probably transition into left guard, and that easily is a spot that he could potentially compete for as a day 1 starter because he has the talent there. Maybe some things to still work on, but really the prize of the draft is with Kyle Pitts. I mean, that for me already puts the Falcons draft class into at least a B- to a B. He is going to bring. He's going to be such a weapon for that offense, and with how creative we've seen Arthur Smith with that Titans offense, I'm very excited to see how the Falcons do, and honestly wondering how our team's going to stop this offense. If they don't end up trading Julio Jones and Julio Jones can stay healthy, you have Julio Jones, Kyle Pitts, and Calvin Ridley that Matt Ryan could throw to. It's going to be one of those pick your poison. I mean,
that doesn't even include Russell Gage or Hayden Hurst.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, and so this offense is going to be absolutely deadly, and they're going to need to be because I think the defense still needs some work. I think the defense is going to improve over last year. That's not really saying much because that defense was abysmal. So they're kind of already starting at the bottom. But I think a lot of the issues with the Falcons last year was coaching and schematic issues or scheme issues, I should say. And that's where I think we're going to see a big improvement on. And honestly, with how dangerous this offense could be if everyone could stay healthy, and the offensive Jalen Mayfield could come in and be amazing, and the defense is average. Like this could be a scary team to play against, and they have a weak schedule. They're facing 4 other fourth place teams, multiple other multiple other rookie quarterbacks, and Jacksonville Jaguars with Trevor Lawrence, New York Jets, and Zach Wilson. Also, Sam Darnold's going to be learning their system in Carolina. We don't know how Taysom Hill and Jameis Winston are going to react in New Orleans. So there's some potential. I could see the Falcons maybe going worst to first. Tampa Bay's still the team to beat, but I think this was a great draft class to help them set up.
Yeah, no, definitely. With strength of schedule, that was a tongue twister. With their strength of schedule, I could definitely see them winning 10 to 12 games this year.
And people don't. So the Falcons, they were 0-8 in one possession games last year, and 5 of those they should have won. I think there were 3 games last year where they had a 99% chance of winning and lost. And I don't think any other team's ever done that before. So the team actually is there. Like, if you're just looking at the record, and if you see this on kind of like the mainstream sports outlets that don't really follow the Falcons that much, that's why everyone was saying they need to get rid of Matty Ice. He's past his prime. You need to get one of these stud quarterbacks, and that's just really not the case. If you actually look down at the team, there's a lot of coaching issues, and they got rid of Dan Quinn and Thomas Dimitroff as the GM. Who Thomas Dimitroff has made good draft pick choices, but also hasn't really drafted a pass rusher, a successful pass rusher throughout his entire time. And so then also with scheme issues with Dan Quinn and also people not staying healthy, that was really like one of the main issues with the defenses over the past couple of years. So bringing in a new regime and also an offensive-minded coach, I really think the Falcons are going to have a winning season this year. I think they can make the playoffs, and I'm not just saying that as a fan. I also am just looking at things on paper. I think they can easily make the playoffs this year with how also weak the NFC is.
Yeah, no, definitely. And that, for me, that offense with Kyle Pitts, if they can keep Julio Jones, I think that's just icing on top of the cake. But for me, this offense is top 5 in the league, easy. I mean, you're talking about comparing it to Kansas City with Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill, and Tampa Bay with Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Rob Gronkowski. Like, that offense is that good. And for me, even if the defense can come in and just be average, I think they're a positive win team. So I do think they're going to struggle to beat teams like Tampa Bay that can go shot for shot with them. I think as Tom Brady gets more and more into that system, even though he is 44 or almost 44, that I still think Tampa Bay is far and away the favorite to win that division. But I think the Falcons are definitely on the right track, and they could definitely be contenders this year.
Yeah, and one thing to consider as well, I could see a lot of these NFC South teams potentially making the playoffs is not only the AFC East. Who would have thought that we'd be saying the AFC East would actually be a harder division to play than the NFC East, and that's who the NFC South is paired up with, because the NFC East is all those teams are struggling or rebuilding. Cowboys are the only one that maybe could be somewhat competitive this year. But then with them, the Falcons facing the NFC East and facing a tough AFC East division as well, but with some question marks, could definitely see the Falcons doing well over this next year.
Yeah, no, definitely.
So I took a lot of that time as a Falcons fan. Definitely.
No. I mean, you know so much more about the Falcons than I do, just because that is your team. I
Your
I
thoughts
do
on
like the Richie Grant pick. I mean, he was one of the top 3 safeties in the draft. And then Jalen Mayfield for me is great value. I mean, he was a guy that I think we both had in our first round of the mock draft, and you guys got him at the top of the 3rd.
Yeah.
So, and then I know Drew Dalman was a center for Stanford. He played for 3 years, and he can come in. I think you guys have almost 4 starting caliber players on your draft in this draft class right now. And that doesn't even include some of the guys that we didn't talk about that could potentially develop and become starters later on.
Well, and that's one of the things, especially there'll be a lot of starters from this draft class just because of how capped restricted the Falcons are. So I could potentially see a cornerback like Darren Hall coming in and being a 3rd cornerback on some plays. Avery Williams, cornerback that they picked at the end of the 5th round, he can't play cornerback, but he's probably was picked for his special team capabilities. Because right now Cordell Patterson is the backup running back, but also the special teams guy, and Avery Williams can probably compete with him on that matter. And we were talking about Julio Jones. If they don't trade him, one of the guys that might actually have to end up moving or released is Russell Gage, and Frank Darby could take that spot as well. So they picked up pieces that can definitely help them now and also in the future in all aspects of the game. And a lot of these guys are very versatile. So it'll be exciting to kind of see what happens, what transpires over the next couple months, and kind of see where all these pieces fall for the Falcons.
Yeah, no. If you were going to give the Falcons a grade, what would you give them?
So I really, honestly, adding Kyle Pitts, even if they trade Julio Jones, which that might be an interesting episode for us to do. We'll mark this one down on potential trade landing spots because it's looking kind of likely. But just taking Kyle Pitts and how much of a game changer he is, you can make a legitimate argument that he was just the overall best player in the draft. So just drafting him with that 4th pick and not a quarterback or the best defensive player, at minimum is a B for me. But I also think they address a lot of important spots with the safety and Richie Grant, who's very versatile. He could play inside. Kind of reminds me a little bit of a Keanu Neal, a little bit, not as hard hitting. Jalen Mayfield coming in, he's versatile. He can play tackle if he wants to, but he'll probably move into guard because Caleb McGarry on the right tackle spot. Jake Matthews is one of the better left tackles in the league. And so moving him into left guard, I think would be a great fit because he's a very active, very quick, nimble lineman. And I think that's going to be great in that guard position. So I would say B+, A- range. I think they were kind of stuck a little bit. I would have loved to see them maybe get a pass rusher, but I understand why they didn't. Just because
that's what I was going to say.
Yeah,
it's like for me one of the biggest holes you guys had last year was the ability to create a pass rush, and then also actually the running back position for me was something. I know you guys just signed Mike Davis, but for me, not addressing those 2 positions in this draft, especially I think you guys needed cornerback help, but I like round 4, guys like Chuba Hubbard were still there. And so for me, I would have liked to see a running back or defensive lineman taken before the 5th round. So for me, I'm going to give the Falcons a B+.
Well, and so
B to B+.
Well, and so that's where and we were talking about at this point, some of the day 3 picks, they're just going to be a different philosophical reason on why some of these picks are made. But the one thing I thought about that too with the running back. I think if I'm not mistaken, Michael Williams was still available, or he was just taken. Actually, I think literally the pick before by the Jets. But with that 4th overall pick, that is what I would have thought they would have done, and they ended up going cornerback. I think it's the same thing that Falcons have done in the past, and this is a new regime. It's to not force picks, not try and fill a need, but still who is the best player available. And so, I think just to kind of just wrap up the Falcons, because I know passionate about this, But I think overall this was a good draft class for them. I'm very curious to kind of see. I really am looking at these first 5 picks: Kyle Pitts, Richie Grant, Jalen Mayfield, Darren Hall, and Drew Dalman. Even also Taquan Graham. He had a good career at Texas. All these guys could come in probably on day one. Well, also might have to come in on day one just because they need roster spots filled. And could contribute to the team. So it'll be very interesting to see the Falcons over the section.
Yeah, no, definitely. I agree. One of the teams for me, though, in this division that has the biggest question mark coming into this year is just because they got a new quarterback, and I think they have not the lowest floor because I think the Saints could be the worst team in this division, but I think this team could be a surprise contender, and that is the Carolina Panthers, who picked 8th overall. And so for me, this one I have some quarrels with because I like the player that took it 8. I like J.C. Horn. And so for me, I hate saying this, but I don't like the fit because they play like a cover 3 off zone. And that's kind of what their defense is built upon. That's what Jeremy Chin, their rookie safety that they had last year, is very good at. He likes to play downhill, kind of let the receivers' routes run to him, and then make bigger hits. And that's what their whole defensive scheme is built around, is play off man and then let those defensive players they drafted, like Derek Brown, Yetur Gross-Matos, Montez Sweat, get after the quarterback. And so for me, I don't think J.C. Horn is a good fit here. For that reason, because he is a press man corner, and so maybe they'll do like some man zone schemes now. But for me, I just don't think it's a good fit. And J.C. Horn did not have good zone film in college. I like the Terrace Marshall pick at 59. I think he's a very good receiver who could turn out to be very good for them, and I think he fits well into the Robbie Anderson, DJ Moore duo that they have going on there. And then I like the Chuba Hubbard pick at 126 in round 4. I think for me, he was an underrated running back, but he's a guy that can do it all. And kind of Christian McCaffrey was injured a lot last year. And I think Chuba Hubbard could be a guy that could come in and really fill in if Christian McCaffrey gets hurt again. So. And then lastly, to kind of round it out, I think in round 6, pick 204, they got the wide receiver Shi Smith out of South Carolina. And that is another guy that had a lot of success at the Senior Bowl, who I think will be successful in the NFL. He's a nice underneath guy. He lacks kind of a second gear, and I think that's the main reason why he fell so far, is that he doesn't have elite top-end speed. But I think he still ran in the 4.4s. At his pro day, and I mean, he is elite quickness and really solid hands. So for me, that is kind of my recap. I just think they kind of wasted that first overall pick on a corner that just doesn't fit their scheme. Who's a great player, just doesn't fit their scheme.
So I understand what you mean, and that's what it's going to be really interesting. We're going to be looking back at this pick 5 years from now, because it's a very interesting pick, because they J.C. Horn and Patrick Surtain, it's one of the few times probably where we'll be able to accurately see which pick was better, because at the time both cornerbacks played the same receivers that are all now in the NFL and had the same game film against these same receivers, as both were the number 1 overall cornerback for their team. And we'll get to see what the Panthers really saw in them, instead of taking Patrick Surtain, which was arguably, a lot of people probably said was the better cornerback in the draft. So it'll be interesting to see how this pick works out. And personally, I thought Patrick Surtain, I think, was the overall better cornerback. J.C. Horn maybe has a little bit higher upside, but the difference, I thought Patrick Surtain did have the edge overall. But all in all, though, if we're looking at like what the draft is for, and getting and rookies that can potentially come in on day one and start and contribute from from the get-go. I think the Panthers did an overall good job, even going all the way down to their long snapper pick, Thomas Fletcher from Alabama.
Yeah.
That's a guy. He's going to be. He's a long snapper that can have a long career with them, and he'll be really cheap as the rookie. So even picking him up, I don't know why. I guess they couldn't get him as an undrafted free agent, but I guess maybe just to make sure that they had a long snapper. But J.C. Horn will be able to come in on day one and start. Terrace Marshall, day one start. Christensen, Hubbard, Nixon, Keith Taylor, not as sure, but Deonte Brown with Alabama as well. Keep coming on day one and start. And Shi Smith as well. Do you like that pick? Do you like that announcement? Saying Addie was saying she liked it. But so I agree. They might not be the sexiest picks, you know what I mean? And not to talk about the fact, but like a Kyle Pitts, like that type of sexy pick, or I know people were potentially wanting them to draft Justin Fields as he was available. And I know I even think I predicted that maybe like it doesn't take them out of the running, so to say. But I think if we're talking about overall value, what these guys can contribute to this year and to the future, I thought the Panthers actually had a decent draft. So we'll just have to see over time if the J.C. Horn pick was the correct pick or if Surtain would have been the better pick.
Yeah, well, that was so. Like for me, I just feel like Surtain was the better pick. I think he's a more versatile corner, and to me, J.C. Horn is strictly a cover man, and that just doesn't like I don't know if maybe they want to switch to more of a man scheme and then play Jeremy Chin as more of like a box safety on like some tight ends and running backs out the backfield. But for for you're going to switch around your whole defense last year, which by the way was not actually that bad. And just for this one pick, I was like, when you could have drafted a guy that would have fit your scheme, and then you wouldn't have even had to talk about switching it, and then your players could continue to develop, continue to learn the defense, and be better for it in this upcoming season. But I do think they drafted some good players, and I don't want it to seem like I'm just bashing the Panthers draft, because like I do like J.C. Horn as a press man corner, and I really like Terrace Marshall Jr., especially for where they got him at pick 59 overall. And then a guy I didn't mention is guard Deonte Brown. He's not a great run blocker just because he's not very athletic, because he's 6'4", 350. But I mean, you put him at guard. I mean, he's 350 pounds. Who's gonna get around him? Who's gonna move him off the ball that very easily? And so for me, I just think that they had a good draft. That first pick for me kind of, I don't know.
I know what you mean. Did that drop your overall? Did that drop your overall grade for them?
I'm gonna give them a B, just because I like the players and I think that they're good players. I just don't think it's a scheme fit. I kind of want to give them like a C+, but I like the talent that they have. I just don't know if that it's like together, if it makes sense. I don't know. I could be super wrong. So, but yeah, I'm just gonna go with a B and call it a day. So,
okay, all right. I'll do a little bit better. I'll also go with a B+, similar to the Falcons. The reason is just because I think the guys that they did have for this upcoming season will be day one starters. I think a lot of these picks will. I mean, Chuba Hubbard wouldn't be the starter, but he will provide. He will be. He will see playing time for sure, and will slide in as the number 2 back behind Christian McCaffrey, and can provide a different look and more depth at the running back position. But a lot of those guys I think can come in and start and provide some serious value. So that's why I'll grade them a little bit higher, personally.
Okay.
So
all right. I do like the players. I just some of them for me just aren't necessarily scheme fits. Even with Deonte Brown, the guard that they drafted, they run the ball a lot. You need some athletic offensive guards to pull.
That's true.
So for me, that's my biggest issue with the Panthers draft, is I just don't know if they may have drafted the best player on the board, but I just don't know if their system will allow those players to succeed.
Yeah.
And so that
makes sense.
Yeah. So I was going to say that kind of leaves us with 2 teams left, and the Saints picked at 28 overall. And I don't know if you guys watched our live stream. This was one of the more questionable moments of the night. When they drafted Peyton Turner, the edge rusher out of Houston.
Yep.
So,
I remember when that happened. We both just kind of looked at each other and never really heard of him. Seemed like he had a good career at Houston. Potentially a little high. They potentially could have gotten him in the second round as well. Position wise, I like it just because in this division you're going to want to get after the quarterback, and especially get to Tom Brady, Matt Ryan, Sam Darnold, all these guys, because none of those guys are really speedsters, as we're seeing in some of the other divisions where teams are starting to get the dual threat quarterback. It's ironic the NFC South might have some of the best offenses, but some of the slowest quarterbacks. But to still just add defensive pass rushing depth is huge. One thing with this pick, I feel like there's some other guys that could have potentially – I think might have a higher ceiling. I think Gregory Rousseau was still available and was taken a little bit later. I thought this would have been a good spot for him to maybe be a flyer because physically he's just an absolute freak. And so, but time will tell. The pick I really don't like with them is the Ian Bach pick. I don't like that pick at all because you're already having a QB competition with Taysom Hill and Jameis Winston, and now I felt like you wasted a pick on a quarterback that was fine, but some significant ceiling concerns because some of the physical tools aren't really there. Like Mac Jones was more physically gifted than Ian Bach, and he was a fit or book, and was fit overall. You know what I mean? And was passed by all these teams that needed quarterbacks. So,
and that
but also
is like he wasn't even that great of a college quarterback.
Yeah.
I guess he was in the Heisman running for like the first 6 games. But I mean, as soon as he played against Clemson and their defense, I mean, he looked not good at all. And so for me, the Saints had the worst draft of every team in this division.
I think so as well. It definitely seems it just seems kind of confusing. Like they didn't have that many picks to begin with, and it felt like they wasted several of them. I felt like they could have gotten better talent.
Well, I also don't even really like the Pete Warner pick, the linebacker out of Ohio State. I think that was a reach for a guy like Pete Warner. He's a good downhill guy. Like if you want to play him inside on like maybe some bigger packages, I could understand why. But for a second round pick, you get a slow linebacker that is almost 250 pounds that really struggles to guard elite speed, elite athleticism in a division now that, I mean, you have Terrace Marshall Jr., DJ Moore, and Robbie Anderson on the Panthers. You have the plethora of weapons that we talked about earlier in the episode on the Falcons. And then we have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who's we're about to talk about, who have weapons galore, and they're all speed. That's for me. I don't understand the pick. The first 2, I don't understand the first 3 out of the 4, really.
Yeah.
The Paulson Adebo pick is the best pick, in my opinion, the best player, and they took him at 76. And so they could have addressed their receiver need at 28 by drafting Elijah Moore, Terrace Marshall Jr.
They could have gotten a better cornerback with Eric Stokes or Tyson Campbell at 28. And to go across Malcolm Butler, because that's the need for them as well. Yeah, it just feels like some of the picks. And not really addressing the receiver position until Quan Baker from South Alabama until I think is that Mr. Irrelevant? Is that one of the last picks?
It's pretty close. I think it is.
Okay. Yeah. So not addressing him until the the receiver position until the very end. And actually,
It was Grant Stewart.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But not really addressing too many offensive needs because that was actually some of the bigger issues I felt like for the Saints. I thought their defense was actually pretty solid throughout last year, but Drew Brees did have some arm strength issues, but also he didn't. Their weapons started to are starting to go away a little bit. Michael Thomas is getting a little bit older, so it was just an interesting draft with the only picks that they did have. So. For me, I don't know about you, but I'm giving them a C personally, and so I just time will tell, but it just felt like they didn't provide as much value as they could have.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm going to be a little rougher on them because I think they needed to have a good draft, and I also think that they lost really bad in free agency, and so for me, I'm going to go with a D+.
Okay.
D means done in this book, and I think the Saints have done themselves in. I just look at their picks and I look at everybody else in this division and like even Carolina, and I was pretty critical of Carolina's draft. Even Carolina to me has players that I think will make an immediate impact. And I don't think Peyton Turner is going to make an immediate impact. I don't know if Pete Warner will either. Paulson Adebo, I think, is the only guy that can come in and start, and that's just because they have no other corners.
Yeah. Well, I will say in Peyton Turner's defense, at this point in the draft, there's a lot of like talent that they could have picked from, and especially I think we saw. Did we see? Eric Stokes was 29th, but from this point, it was 4 or 5 defensive ends were taken, or pass rushers were taken. So at this point, it is going to be all personal preference. It's not like they missed out on a gem, or like a sure thing, in like Chase Young or something like that in the 28th pick, so to say. So only time will tell if Peyton Turner was the right pick. My issue with it is I did feel like there was better talent to take a chance on. Than Peyton Turner. And potentially Peyton Turner could have even fallen down to their second pick, so to say. Same with Pete Warner, as you said. He's a linebacker, but he's a little bit slower, especially in that division. So, and the one that really just I feel like it's just a waste of a pick because you already have a QB competition, and isn't Taysom Hill signed for 4 years now? He's got a 4-year contract. So then drafting Ian Book. It just doesn't make. I feel like that's a waste of a pick when you could have gotten good receiver talent there, or like running back depth behind Alvin Kamara. If you're trying to look offensively, there's still some good offensive linemen that were there. So that's where it drops for me because I feel like some of the picks don't make sense.
Well, I agree with that, and so I'm going to read off some of the picks that I think would have been better in that spot than what they drafted. Granted, I think a lot of them would be, but I think Elijah Moore would have been a great pick for them. Christian Barmore, the defensive tackle out of Alabama, although I'm glad that they let him drop. And then Levi Onwuzurike, the defensive tackle out of Washington. Asante Samuel Jr. Azeez Ojulari went much later.
Jeremiah Usu-Koromoa.
Yeah, Jeremiah Usu-Koromoa went shortly after that. To me, I think the Saints botched it, but maybe that's why they get paid to do it and we don't, and we're wrong.
Yeah.
But even I think a lot of the experts are kind of saying, like, what did they do?
Yeah. It just seems, well, there's definitely a different kind of philosophy on like take best player available or fill a position in need, and that's where it's like even with this Peyton Turner pick, if this was a need, I feel like there was better talent, but I also feel like he wasn't the best player available at that time either. So, like, I agree. I think Elijah Moore with that offense, then Michael Thomas on the other side, if he can stay healthy, then Alvin Kamara in the backfield. You got Taysom Hill and Jameis Winston, both dual threat quarterbacks. I think that could become a really deadly offense, especially in a division where you're going to need to put up points. So,
yeah, you have to put up points. And I think a security blanket like Elijah Moore would be great for a quarterback that was going to need some help. And so, I don't know. For me, I question the Saints draft very highly.
Yeah,
So
I agree. So, but lastly, then going to the Super Bowl champions, I honestly thought that they had a with the 32nd pick overall. There's not really much you can do. I feel like you're taking one, you're already probably in a pretty good spot because you're just won the Super Bowl.
yeah,
Secondly, they don't really need much, and I thought they did a good job just kind of providing some depth and kind of preparing for the future. Tryon, don't know too much about him, but it's kind of similar pick, I think, to Peyton Turner, adding some depth and could be a project here, a lot of high ceiling.
yeah.
I do like the Kyle Trask pick because I think that's a good position for him. Obviously, going to be behind Tom Brady, but also he's going to need a couple years, I think, to kind of grow. But there is also a lot of talent there as well. Interesting to see how he ends up doing over the next couple of years. But what are your overall thoughts on the Buccaneers draft so far? Not so far.
For me, I like the Joe Tryon pick a little bit. I think he is kind of like a Shaq Barrett guy that is very athletic edge rusher. And I think he's a good developmental project. And I guess for this point in the draft, he had some of the production to kind of go along with it. But in a way, I think he was kind of like a Gregory Rousseau type of production where he was inconsistent, but he had some really good games. But they were also a team that could afford to take this risk and not the Saints. The Saints could not have afforded to take the risk. So that's why I like this pick a little bit better than the Peyton Turner one. I like Kyle Trask. To me, his biggest problem was his decision-making, and I think sitting behind Tom Brady will be good for him. Yeah. Robert Hainsey out of Notre Dame. I mean, interior offensive lineman is a need with Tom Brady because if you allow people to get pressure up the middle, then that's Tom Brady's biggest downfall. That's the only way people have ever been able to consistently beat Brady is to put pressure up the middle.
Yeah.
My favorite pick that they had was round 4, pick 129, Jalen Darden.
I thought you'd like that pick.
Elite speed.
Yeah.
Elite speed. Slightly undersized guy, but I think him and Scotty Miller in the slot, that puts a lot of teams on notice because now you can't pack the box against Leonard Fournette. Not that you could pack the box in any ways against the Buccaneers, but I mean, a guy that can help on special teams, can score anytime he touches the football. He's a great pick, and it makes that offense even scarier just because it's one more thing that Bruce Arians can utilize to get the ball down the field. So,
well, and also it provides them for depth in the long run because then if guys like Chris Godwin end up leaving or Gronkowski or Scotty Miller ends up leaving or getting hurt, then you still have these other weapons that can be plug and play type guy as well. And so that was my thing. When I saw them pick that, I was very interested in your overall thoughts because I thought he had a lot of athletic ability. Coming from a North Texas team that was pretty solid this year, and he was kind of the one of the stars as standouts from that program over the past couple of years.
He was a guy I was very high on that I wanted New England to draft. Yeah. Very fast. He didn't time very well on the 40-yard dash, but not only does he have elite top-end speed, he has elite burst out of his breaks. I mean, he's a slot weapon that I think Tom Brady will really, really love in Tampa Bay. Yeah. So to me, that's my favorite pick, best value that they have on there. But
yeah, well, and it's kind of the Buccaneers. I felt like every pick was actually just adding depth, even the Kyle Trask pick, literally just adding depth to the quarterback position, and preparing for the future. But it's the same thing. Their offensive line, just adding more depth than Robert Hainsey, even KJ Britt from Auburn, adding more linebacker depth. So, all in all, I think a fine draft. Not really any player that just pops out at me that's amazing. I give them a B minus. But that's not. I think some of that is actually just since they were picking 32nd overall.
Yeah.
Nothing against the picks themselves.
Yeah, I'm gonna just go with a B for me because they're in a tough spot picking at 32 and at the back end of every round, but they returned all 22 of their starters from last season, and they returned mostly players that were on the team, and so for me, I think they could afford to take some of these risks and just kind of build depth and just not really have to do anything that's overly like drastic. And so for me, I think they did a good job with like kind of what they were given. But again, like you said, nothing that like pops off the screen. So I'm just going to go with a B and call it there. So,
yeah.
But overall, I think this division had a pretty good draft, excluding the Saints. But I don't know. So post-draft, we have a few more minutes here to spare. But post-draft, who do you think is now the favorite to win the division? Do you think it's still the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, or do you think the Falcons did enough to unseat them? What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, still the Buccaneers for sure. I mean, it's kind of what you just said already. They're bringing back 22. They're bringing back all 22 starters, and they just won the Super Bowl. I'm a firm believer. If you want to be considered the favorite, you got to first beat the favorite, and there's never going to be much of an opportunity like this one where all the starters are returning, and then they're adding depth as well. So that being said, the thing that's interesting about the NFC South is how much potential there is, but it could also be horrendously awful. Like the Saints could have a lot of potential and potentially make a run. We don't really know how Taysom Hill or Jameis Winston are going to do in a full starting season with the Saints, or really what kind of offense they're going to be running. Is it going to be kind of a dual quarterback situation? I'm sure John Payton's got something up his sleeve, but it also could be horrendously awful as well, and they could just stink to high heavens. Injuries will always play a factor, and I think depth defensively, I think they tried to address some of that, but we don't know if they address it with the best positions. But like you said, they lost a lot in free agency as well. Carolina, how's Sam Darnold going to do with his new system? That could be interesting. And the Falcons, how's that defense going to be throughout this whole year? And can they, as a new coaching staff, going to be able to close games? So that's where all three of the other teams had big question marks, which is why Tampa Bay for me is still the clear number one favorite in that division.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think Tampa Bay is the number one. The only team I can see challenging them would be the Falcons. And I think those games are just going to depend on how well the Falcons can move the ball and if the Falcons can close it out. Because they had a game last year against Tampa Bay. They were up 24-7 in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, they should have won that game.
They lost 34-27, I think.
Yeah.
And so for me, can the Falcons hold it together for all four quarters and play good enough defense? It's just kind of unknown. I think if they trade Julio, I think that makes their top 5 offense a top 10 offense, which is still very good. But
they had one of the better offenses last year, and Julio Jones only played in 9 games, only had 700 something yards. I think only 2 or 3 touchdowns. So there, with Kyle Pitts coming in, you can make an argument that this offense might you can make an offense. Let's say if they trade Julio Jones, that this offense could be better than last year's offense, only because Julio Jones played in only half the games, had a mediocre season according to Julio Jones standards. If Julio Jones stays, then that is the best case scenario for the Falcons. The only issue with that is going to be what do they have to give up? By that I mean, who do they have to cut? What strings need to be made for them to clear up cap space? Because they haven't signed any of their rookie deals yet, And that's what makes it more and more likely that they're waiting to trade Julio after June 1st, because then they'll save $15 million in cap space. That's $15 million right there. We've already talked about Russell Gage coming in and replacing. Well, it's not replacing, but being a weapon to throw to. He had a really good year last year. And so he could easily come in. He's already kind of receiver number 2. Then you have Kyle Pitts come in, tight end number 1, arguably receiver number 1, just because he's a freak athlete. So it'll be interesting. I think the Falcons are going to be the most intriguing team in this upcoming year in the NFC South. In the NFC South.
Yeah. I still think Tampa Bay, like I said, is the favorite to win it, but we'll see. I think that's going to do it for this episode of the Tracy Take. We will be going live tomorrow night to discuss our thoughts on the release of the schedule. See who has the easiest, the hardest. Who is Tampa Bay going to play on Thursday night of the opening game? We will talk about it all tomorrow. So thank you guys for listening.